Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Every Day is Friday 365. I'm your host, Matthew, and remember to subscribe so you can join me on this journey where every day is Friday. Today, I got a really special guest joining us, Preston Zeller. He has made an AI-powered Christian journaling app designed to help manage stress and deepen your faith. He has also made a powerful film called The Art of Grieving after the loss of his brother in 2019. Let's jump right into it. Thank you for being here, man.
Matthew, thank you so much for having me on. Appreciate
Yeah,
it. And it
no,
is a great Friday to be doing this.
yes, it is. Yes, it is. How's life been treating you lately? And where are you finding meaning and purpose today in life?
Yeah, good question. Well, I start my day by reading scripture so that I stay grounded. Otherwise, I get in the way of myself a lot. It's been a really interesting roller coaster building Psalm log. We also homeschool, so there's that. But yeah, I mean, just looking for the breakthroughs and talking to customers, talking to just the community. I mean, I'm building other things as well at the same time. So, and then of course, like talking with people like you on a weekly basis has just been really gratifying too. So, a lot going on, and I try not to be. I try not to stay in this shroud of busyness just for like the sake of it, which is easy to do nowadays. I will say I take my physical health really seriously. So working out, I live in Arizona, so take hikes right now before it starts to get kind of hellish outside with the heat. So yeah.
Now, Preston, can you dive in to what you do actually for the listeners who may not be familiar with your line of work yet? Can you give us a quick rundown of who you are and what you do?
Yeah. So, I mean, I've been in and around building technology and marketing technology, growing technology companies for the past 15 plus years. And so, about a year ago, I got this idea to really combine AI with this notion of Christian journaling. And the idea there being people keep journals and they don't go back and look at them. They just, they kind of develop this archive of themselves. And there's this, with LLMs and stuff like that we have access to is, particularly on the sort of product side, there's a trove there to help you better understand yourself. And, that's kind of what my track record points back to with my documentary and stuff. So I'm fundamentally building this place where you can get personalized biblical advice 24/7 and not have to deal with like pastoral wait times or wait for your next counseling appointment, or maybe you just don't have a friend that you feel comfortable talking to about a thing, or they're not available. That's a hard nut to crack. I'm not going to lie. A lot of controversy around that. Some people are pro, some people are anti. I don't really care about those opinions as much as I care about doing it right. And so I'm taking this sort of theological background and my, spiritual understanding, and then merging that with technology and bleeding edge technology. And it's a crazy journey. Not for the faint of heart, I'd say, to use that cliche, but it's tough. It's a lot more. It's a lot weirder than, say, building like a travel app or something that's like a general productivity app where, it's not challenging your like personal beliefs, I guess, in a way. So,
Yeah, I mean, I really
yeah.
want to ask you, why do you think technology can be used to help people grow spiritually? And if you could dive into how you came up with the idea for a Christian journaling app.
Yeah, I mean, well, so for one, I think technology is, I mean, and we think about technology like computers and internet and stuff like that, but technology is just really some kind of invention or evolution of what has already, the way you were doing things. So I like to go back to the Gutenberg press, right? Um, Formidable form of technology that came about, whatever, 500 years ago. TV, radio, obviously the internet. So those are all like forms of technology, right? We just happen to live in a time and a place where this crazy tool that is AI and in the context of the internet has come about. And in again the context of faith too, the Bible was it's really a library of books, right? It's 66 books. And then there's other extra biblical ones depending on where you go, but there's 66 core books. it's a lot of text, and it's written in a time it was written in a time where there's like metaphors, allegories used that may be hard to understand, cultural differences. And so when people read that today, it can seem very foreign, and it takes time to sit with. And so understanding that can be really difficult, especially when you're not well versed in it. So I think technology is a huge potential to help us address that better and understand it. And I don't think that's accidental that technology has kind of emerged in this way. On the journaling front, I actually was coming off of really of acquisition that fell through of another company. And I learned a lot. This is 2024. I learned a lot about like how that company in particular was kind of the methodologies they were using to build their AI tool in particular, but they were just concepts that are used very broadly at this point. And when that fell through, I started thinking like, okay, what could this be applied to? How could these principles be applied? I was also in the real estate data space at the time. So I'm used to dealing with like sets of data and how can you draw patterns and analysis and insights from that. And I was actually listening to a podcast where it was, some young guy who's crushing it on like TikTok apps. He was talking about this notion of journaling in the use of AI, how that could be really helpful. And that really struck me because I just, again, like going back to my documentary, and we'll talk about that and just how I've used art to kind of process my own thoughts and feelings over time. I've journaled, of course, journaling. I'm like, wow, if this could actually help people reflect more, and get more insights out of the Bible, that would be great. But what I realized is that Psalmlog became much less about like overt journaling than it did about that personalization aspect and getting to like kind of a quick understanding of, hey, where in scripture can speak to my current situation. And so that's why I sometimes I go back and forth between the journaling verbiage. It is kind of in essence journaling, but journaling is also somewhat of a broad kind of category if you consider that if I go see a counselor regularly, well, that's kind of a form of verbal journaling, although I'm not maybe referencing that later on. It's just how am I getting out of my head the things that I'm dealing with and not pushing those things down? And then what's sort of the mirror that I'm using to, reflect on that with?
Preston, I realize many people want biblical advice, but they don't know where to like look.
Mm-hmm.
What does your app, the Christian journaling app, bring? How can people use it every day, and how do you what do they do when they go into the app?
Yeah, good question. So, right off the bat, you can start a new session, and you can do this for free, by the way, without even signing in. You can get a first entry for free before you register. But it's gonna basically ask you, hey, what do you want to journal about today, or what do you want to talk about? Are you seeking wisdom? Do you have anxiety? Like, kind of topically what it is. So we'll give you like 8 main categories. Once you pick that, it's gonna then prompt you with a question to help kind of spur those thoughts that you might have around that topic. And then it's going to attach a relevant Bible verse for that topic. When you're in the full experience of the app, you can then add more verses that may be relevant. Maybe you're reading those in front of you or in the app itself. And then you'll just type out, or if you're using the mobile app and you're on a subscription, you can talk as well. So there's a voice feature there. And you got to type out just what you're feeling. What are you thinking about? Just in the same way people use any kind of physical or digital journaling. Once you do that, it's going to then go through a pretty extensive process in the background, which is part of our IP, that is then going to return a 6-point breakdown of what you just described that you are going through. And I designed that to be distinctly different than just, say, a ChatGPT experience or whatever kind of chat bot. This is really designed to give you a quick inference point of really what it is you're going through with specific categories. So you're not just kind of doing this back and forth rabbit hole. But the beauty there is the more you journal, the more context there is for future journals to be able to like help you understand what that evolution of change is. Not only that though, but we have a couple different dashboards and are building out more extensive ones to help you pull insights out of those journals as well, to see patterns in how's your sentiment towards different topics changing, what scriptures are you exploring the most, what are the themes of your journaling that are being pulled out, different things like that.
I love that. That is so cool. I also love how like the app turns someone's situation into a scripture-based advice.
Yeah, well, one of the ways you could think about it is you're getting a personalized devotional. I think a lot of people have picked up devotional books along the way, and I read those from time to time too, but sometimes you can read those and you're like, okay, that was good, but I'm really experiencing this other thing over here. In a pretty extensive survey I did of Christians and how they're kind of troubleshooting their problems, most or many will go to Google, right? They'll start at
Mhm.
Google and be like, verses for anxiety, verses for fear, whatever the case is, and even then at times you could get those verses and you're like, yeah, still it's just maybe it's a proverb, maybe it's one verse, but you want more. Like, how do you make sense of that in light of your situation? You may get that clarity right away, and you may not. Um, but the overarching, kind of theme here is that you're getting a contiguous story for yourself of understanding how you're evolving too. So there's the immediacy of the journal you get back, the insights, and then there's the overtime version of that.
I want the listeners and people watching understanding that it's not replacing the Bible, it's actually
Mm.
using it together with it.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah,
how do you make
and
sure the app stays true to the scripture?
that's a great question, and I've had that asked a lot. Part of that has to do with a lot of the background engineering that is done. So there's like prompt engineering is one that I don't think that's a foreign concept to people. And then there's like a classifier system and just a lot of different things that I've gone through to engineer specifically so that it can't like break biblical rules. And I do a lot of testing. I do ongoing testing myself with a myriad of really kind of fringy situations to make sure the advice is sound as well. But that's partially why I said it's a weird territory to wade into. It's not going to be perfect, and so that's why I'm always just trying to talk to customers and see really how it's working for them. What would they like to see different? But yeah, making sure that it's having good theological guardrails is really important. The other thing I'll say too, Matthew, is it's not designed to like cater to every different denominational vibe, you know?
Okay.
So it's really meant to go, okay, what does the Bible just clearly say about this thing? And where there may be a gray area, there are certain things in scripture that really are a matter of free will and then conviction. And so it's okay, alcohol is one of those, right? You have certain denominations will be like, you can never drink alcohol. And you have other people that are like, if you're not doing it in excess and you're not getting to drunkenness and clouding your mind, a drink of alcohol or a glass of beer or whatever is not a big deal. So that's one of those things where people could become dogmatic about, and you've seen that in the church. It's not going to take a hard line on something like that. Or if you're Catholic, it's not going to speak to like praying the rosary. Not yet anyways, but yeah, so that's a distinction there.
Some people worry about like AI and faith mixing together.
Mm-hmm.
I want you to talk to those people. What would you say to them?
Yeah, I mean, AI is it's a tool. It's not good or bad. Same way money isn't good or bad. A spoon isn't good or bad. You could put on 300 pounds with a spoon. You could also eat very well and nutritiously. One thing I think the church has to be careful about is not backing out of AI and being like, oh, we're just not going to touch it because it's scary and ooh, and what's it going to do? It's finding the proper applications for it. And the good thing is I'm in circles where I'm seeing people have positivity around it. Now, it does take a lot of concerted effort to figure out what is the use case for your community. I mean, you have churches may be like, hey, we're comfortable doing this, whatever that is. Maybe it's just, the ability to search sermon notes and get answers from that. But I, I don't think it's much different than, say, talking or listening to someone on YouTube, buying a book, listening to a pastor in church. Like, you don't check your brain at the door on any of these things. And I wouldn't expect you to do that with Psalm Log either. You're always going to seek to have discernment in situations. And that, of course, is going to help you figure out, hey, is this thing, does this line up what I'm reading? And ultimately, read the Bible for yourself, and not just take any one book or commentary's word for it or just Psalm Log's word for it. Like, go dive deeper. That is the ultimate place to go, and being in prayer with God, of course. So, yeah, I would encourage people not learn more about it if you're like scared about it, because I have seen so many really deceptive kind of fear mongering videos about AI that it's maybe for clicks, whatever, but those kind of bug me. So
I'm just thinking, what kind of life situations do people ask the app about the most?
the most, I don't have that off the top of my head, and to some degree, so seeking wisdom is like one of the top category people are in there for. But I've heard everything from people. This is people sharing with me marriage issues, job hunting, just general relational issues, child raising, navigating a point of uncertainty in life, things like that. I couldn't point to an exact, like, hey, here's 52% of people are doing this kind of thing just yet, but I do know people are bringing real problems to it, though, and they're getting answers and feeling like they're getting clarity on it.
Yeah, I could see people reading the Bible and then going to the app to ask a question about the Bible.
That's actually how I first started using it, um, which made me have a lens of bias on it. That is definitely a way you could use it. So what I was doing is either reading an app or with my hard copy in front of me, and then I was tagging my journal entries and more doing like, hey, what does blaspheming the Spirit mean? Um, you know, and giving a little more context than that, like, hey, here's what I think it means, here's what I'm wrestling with. But yeah, so you could use it as an assistive like Bible study tool too.
Now, have you seen an uptick in downloads? Because for me personally, I mean, I've been seeing a lot of people searching for faith again.
Yeah. Um, there's a lot of faith-based apps out there. So faith tech is like the umbrella category. Yeah, so I have seen more downloads. We launched August of last year, and then I kind of pivoted to the current positioning and messaging around it. I'd say late in the year, when I really kind of, after I did some more research and understanding why people were using it. Um, there's a lot of different angles to this too, that I think people are trying to figure out what is the right tool for me. I mean, I spend time in Reddit forums. I spend time talking to other Christian leaders and just other believers in general. Talking at my men's group next week about it. Just what are people's, how are they thinking about where this fits in, right? Because the Bible app, that's like table stakes for people. They have some reader. And then there's so many offshoots from there. And so what I'm doing is actually a kind of novel concept for believers to be able to do what I've described in terms of like journaling with this sort of like collaborative, practice, if you will. That's not really mainstream, I guess you could say. So I'm having to do a lot of education and awareness, and hence why, I go on podcasts and stuff like this to be able to, really put myself out there as the person who's, been creating this and innovating it, but also um, that these kinds of solutions do exist because I've validated people want them. It's just what is the right tool. And there's different ones out there that address it differently. I think Pray.com and Hallow are the biggest, right? And they've had
Mhm.
the most funding, so which makes sense there. But there's other ones on the app stores I've seen.
But the way you said it was so right. Um, there's a right tool for every job. Now, how can someone strengthen their faith when they feel spiritually stuck using the Christian journaling app?
Yeah. So I think one of the problems people feel is isolation in their convictions. You have whatever thing you're struggling with, and you feel like, man, I'm the only one, or I'm afraid to actually tell anyone this. And that's actually part of why Psalm Log exists. Um, to be able to, like, you may have something legitimately that you just don't want to share with people. I was talking with one of the pastors at my church the other night about this, how people will come and go. They'll eventually maybe open up and say, I was terrified to share this thing. And most pastors are like, you're not going to shock them. They've heard it all, but we have our own insecurities there. So I think there's like number one is you just have to start to open up. If you never open up about what it is you're going through, whether you're doing it through Psalm Log, whether you're doing it with a friend, whatever the case is, like, you got to be willing to open up a bit, because look, we're all broken in some way and have these things that we need to like work through. And it ain't going to happen by putting it in a pressure cooker and just waiting it for to go away. I learned a lot of that through my own grief experience as well. But yeah, so I think just being honest with yourself and really asking God for guidance there in general. Like, hey, just where should I go? What should I do? Start praying if you're not praying. That's huge.
Now, where did the name Psalm Log come from?
I'm glad you asked that. Most people don't ask that. Well, I wanted something short. I mean, I've created a lot of products and I don't like long product names, something memorable. Um, but it's a truncation of the book of Psalms, right? A psalm is really a song. It's, or it's like poetry, but um, it's an expression of yourself, right? And so it's a kind of a verbatim play on what Psalm log is. It's a log of your sharing, either verbally or written, um, what you want to feel. And it's like, what did David do? He was really kind of lamenting and then rejoicing and then everything kind of in between in the book of Psalms. So yeah, it was just a simple combination of those two words.
Now, can you dive a little bit deeper for the people watching and listening? I mean, how does Psalm Log help people find Bible wisdom quickly?
Yeah. So there's one particular section in Psalm log that's like, it's a scripture connection. So it's actually going to give you and multiple places will give you verses, but it will pull relevant verses that you can read right there. You tap on it, the Bible verse will pop up, and then explain why that applies to your situation. So you're basically discovering new verses that you may not have otherwise known existed, and it may surface those other verses in the different other sections as well, because you have an encouragement, you have a next steps, and a couple other sections that it's pulling those verses for you, and they basically are very easy to find and see when you're reading. So and these may be verses that aren't on any like best hits playlist, right, of verses for that specific situation. So over time, you will basically get to see like a collection of verses and thematically where those sit, that that have been surfaced for you.
If someone wants to grow closer to God starting today, what is one simple step they can take?
Man, I'd say like just pray, like talk to God. Um, and I don't want to be selfish in inserting Psalm log into
I
this.
thought you were going to say download that app.
No,
But
no, no. I think a lot of people it can feel like, man, I haven't talked to God in years. It's like you can feel like that about an old friend. Man, I miss, Jimmy. I haven't talked to Jimmy in a long time. I should call Jimmy up. I think a lot of people are like that with God, where they go, I haven't talked to God in a long time. I know God's there, but I haven't talked to God in a long time. I mean, I think just pray. Ask God to reveal himself to you. Um, Go start reading in either like Proverbs is a great place to start. Like Proverbs has I think 30 chapters, so it's perfect to read one chapter a day. Just do that. I mean, those verses all stand alone, for the most part. And so it's easy to read those. I'd start there. If you have something that you're actively going through that keeps you up at night or you're ruminating on, and maybe you're listening to this going like, man, dude, I've been cycling through the same event in my head for the past 3 months that I can't let go of. In addition to the things I just mentioned, try Psalm Log. Like, just get it out there, what you're thinking about, what you're feeling, and you will get back, I think, a lot more clarity in a very quick amount of time than just trying to work through it on your own or push it down.
Now, have you always been religious, and how has faith guided you through your journey?
I was raised in kind of the evangelical church environment. Towards the end of high school and college, I kind of just walked away from it. I always wanted to have this like deeper intellectual understanding of my faith, but I just didn't. And that's um, it's a common issue, I think, in like youth programs where it's just like, here's the message, but not the deeper thing behind it. At least that's what I went through. So I got deep into like just philosophical stuff in college, and then I was just partying. Frankly, I was just living a party lifestyle. I was in a fraternity about a year, and I worked in the film industry. And about a year outside into my post college adulthood, I was like, I'm empty. I just really, the way I'm doing things is not going to work, and it's going to plunge me deeper into an area that's not good. So I started just going back to church on my own. It was really had to be, this is the first time in my life, it was truly my decision to make a habit out of it. I started praying, eventually went to this huge men's conference in Southern California. It's probably like 10,000 guys. And I was really intrigued by how to live like a man in the last days. That was kind of the theme of it. And I didn't feel like I had that down. I'm like, I don't know what does being a man mean in life. I had some semblance of what that was, but I wanted to be like a biblical man. So what did that mean? Anyways, I really like first, I'd say committed or recommitted my life in 2010. And I just had a really sweeping change, like a true Holy Spirit coming through me, changing my thoughts about things, my friend groups. I mean, I literally called up people who I would go and hang out with, and I went to lunch with them and said, "Hey, I committed my life to Jesus, and I just can't do certain things anymore." And it was so weird. Like, why would I do that? That was not a thing I would have thought to do. So that, of course, was Holy Spirit. And then I started getting just deep into eschatology. So end time theory really kind of intrigued me. And I got married early. I like very quickly after that, I met my wife and we got married. And so we've been doing life together for the past 15 years. Got married about 14 years ago and have 3 kids. And so, that's all been building blocks of how we've lived our life and wanted to teach our kids the right things. And it's funny because I didn't feel like I got that intellectual feeling. My kids, in many ways, they'll say stuff sometimes. I'm like, whoa. I mean, I encourage them to research and find things out on their own. But yeah, so that's the long answer to that question. But I think it deserved it. Yeah.
Faith often grows through different seasons of life. There's a quote I heard recently, and it was like, God is in the fire and flames as well.
Mm.
Like in every season of your life, he might be in more into your life than not. But if you want to bounce off that a little bit yourself, I mean, in different seasons of your life, I mean, how has faith shaped you?
Yeah, one real quick thing, Matthew, is I was reading, I don't remember where it was, but it was talking about silver being refined 7 times. Seven's the number of completion, but it turns out if you actually refine silver 7 times, you're going to end up with pure silver. Um, and for those listening are like, how do you refine silver? It's through fire. So through through an intense amount of heat, but it squeezes out impurities, right? Um, so I've gone through tons of stuff. I mean, my wife and we had a miscarriage early on in our marriage. But then we've also moved a number of times, which has caused like different amounts of turbulence, usually good moves though. Job loss. I mean, we were pretty broke for like a while in our marriage. And by broke, I mean, it was just, okay, we're really scraping by here. We didn't have much for like savings, that kind of stuff. So yeah, felt a bit hand to mouth. In particular, I think thing that really put me through a very heavy season of change was losing my brother in 2019. So I lost him to a drug overdose, and that, I mean, I was really deep into like corporate ladder, corporate career, proving myself, all these things, and that threw me into a tailspin of like, what am I doing this all for? And I remember we were actually sitting around our table, and my kids were young enough at the time. We would just go, "How was your day?" Give a thumbs up, middle, or down. And I was just constantly like thumbs down. And I'm like, what message am I sending to my kids? Always coming home from work, eating dinner, and I got a thumbs down day. What do they think I'm doing all day? It must be terrible. So,
Your big thing is grief. I mean,
mhm.
grief can deeply shape a person's journey, and it has for you. Um, could you unpack this for me and for the listeners? I mean, what made you decide to paint every day for a full year?
Yeah. So early on in, I think after the loss of my brother, I was already painting. I mean, I've been an artist my whole life, so that kind of goes back to the journaling thing. I've used music to journal and kind of work through my own feelings and thoughts. I was doing a lot of big canvases, and it just didn't feel like I was working through my emotions as quick as I wanted to. But those big canvases ended up being at an art show, and at that art show, and it's all abstract, mind you, right? So, I let people go look at the paintings, and then I would go talk to them, and they'd say, "What does this mean?" And after they shared what they were getting out of it, I would tell them. So I'm kind of inadvertently, repeatedly telling my story of loss, and then I start realizing everyone around me that I'm telling that to is like, oftentimes crying because they're reflecting on their own grief. And so it struck me that there was something really kind of profound about the abstract art experience and sharing my own journey. And it was cathartic for me, it was cathartic for other people. So I just kind of combined all that, and I wrote in a journal, oddly enough, 2 sentences or 2 lines. It's one was uh paint every day for a year, make a documentary about it. Those are the 2 lines. So that kicked off that project. And of course, I had to figure out, okay, what logistically, how does this work? I created this custom rig for lighting and stuff, to have lighting and cameras so I could film the paintings and whatnot. And then I had to work out the nuances of what does the documentary look like over that time period. But through that, and we could get to some of the results of the what that documentary has produced, but through that, and there was so many um I guess aha moments for me of having to process what I was going through with my brother. And some people have argued of like, well, you just created a bunch of work for yourself to like distract from it. I'm like, quite the opposite. I created a project to go super deep into my grief, to figure out how I grow. And I'm like a lot of people, I thought, oh, grief would just kind of minimize itself. And it's like, no, you grow around it. So, yeah.
Did you get a lot of feedback through the documentary?
Yeah. So the documentary's at this point been seen in over 40 countries, and it's been used in educational curriculum. It's in physical libraries in U.S. and Canada, and maybe other places too. I've seen people write college papers on it. One guy wrote looked like a dissertation in like Iceland and citing it. So, and then I see comments on like, in YouTube, or I've seen watch parties. There's just some, it was like a funeral home or something back east that they had a 2-day watch party where they were like painting and watching the documentary. I didn't have anything to do with that other than them using the documentary. So I see things like that and it just blows me away, because that is really why I created it, in essence, to, hey, one, expose that, be vulnerable, but also expose that art has a real practical use case in helping people process their emotions. And then because there's these different perspectives in it, it's not just me. There's an art therapist. I go into history and look at like how cultures and whatnot have dealt with art, and grief and death. So there's these different perspectives that I think gets people to just see grief differently, and also ultimately open up a conversation about it, because that is one of the things that really drove me to do it. Is, man, I'm having a terrible day, and you bring up so and so just died, or it's a tough time period, and people get, real stiff and awkward, and it's like, this happens every day to people. It shouldn't be this so awkward for us to talk about. So yeah, it's
The documentary's on Amazon Prime and Tubi and YouTube.
Amazon Prime, Tubi, Apple TV, Plex, just tons of places.
And in the description down below, everybody.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people watch it on YouTube TV or Amazon Prime. But it's you know what the weird thing is too, Matthew? When I found out I was getting picked up by libraries, I'm like, who checks out a DVD anymore? Well, it gets checked out. Like occasionally I'll, just go and see, are people actually checking out these DVDs, and it'll be like 4 out of 4 are checked out. I'm like, what? So that still goes on. They're not totally obsolete.
I had an art teacher that told me that art often helps people express emotions they cannot put into words.
Mm-hmm.
What's your opinion on that?
Well, yeah, we talk about that in the documentary, and Lindsay Letterman, who's the art therapist, she does a great job at really explaining that. And for people who don't know, by the way, art therapists, like, they have to become a formal, like a psychologist, I believe, and then they have to go through art therapy training. So it's you're more qualified than like just talk counseling. But yeah, it's I think she says it taps into your limbic system, and so you're like releasing sort of I don't know, you're tapping into that in a way and releasing it in a way that could have potential to harm you if you don't process those things. Because as she was talking about, that the unresolved sort of grief and all the things around that could be bitterness, could be just shoved down emotions, can surface in the sense, it can surface as physical ailments, can turn into mental ailments. And when you have something visual in front of you, it acts as a mirror of sorts. And the hard thing can be about even talk therapy is you go to it and you talk, and then you just forget what happened. You're like, oh, I think I said that thing last week. Maybe. I mean, these experiences are all kind of part and parcel of wanting to do something like Psalm Log, because even what I found, Matthew, over the year of painting I first had like a rolling 30 days in front of my office, in front of my desk. And so I'd use that to kind of reflect on it. I'm like, oh man, this is how my paintings are kind of evolving. And then once all the paintings are put together at the end, I had this crazy snapshot of a year of going through grief that was so unique. It was unique for me, of course, because I did it. But then other people looked at it and started to get their own insights. I'm like, this is, it's very interesting how that works.
That's so interesting how grief can teach us so many things about life.
Yeah. And I think people should understand too, the grief, of course, isn't exclusive to death, right? Grief is, can be like a broken attachment to something that you long for. And in many ways, I would argue adolescence is basically a form of grief, because you go from being, a kid to now being this teenager, and all these expectations get piled on you, right? And yes, hormonally we're changing, but we're also losing our childhood at the same time. We don't call that grief, but yeah, there's something about when that time period comes and you're like, man, can't I just go play and not have to start thinking about, you know, lengthy exams and, excelling at sports, and oh, now apply for colleges, and then once you go through college, oh, career, like that's a massive change to happen in a short period of time. But yeah, relational loss for sure. Like you see that in divorce or breakups or friendship losses. I mean, I've had people use Psalmlog and they go, they lost a friendship over something, and they're grieving that. So I wouldn't discount your grief. Um, where I think it gets tricky is when people want to live in it constantly versus you're trying to work through it. And that's, I think the goal is to understand it, work through it, grow around it, not sort of use it to suppress your growth. And kind of in some ways you could claim victimhood all the time if you want to stay in that mode, and that can be not a healthy place to live in.
No, I love that point. That is great. Um, what did you learn? What did you learn about grief during your year of painting?
One of the biggest is that you grow around grief. I mean, this is such a common misconception where you think grief is gonna, and I kind of mentioned this earlier, but you think it's gonna shrink and eventually just kind of vanish. It doesn't, and for some people that may take a really long time also. And not discounting that the more intentional you are about working through it, um, and growing around it, then you start to really become that better version of yourself, right? Um, and of course, I think for me in all this, if you have a relationship with God, that hopefully draws you closer to God, because that is where God, I think, feels most tangible in those moments where um, you are just in the dumps emotionally. And I'll be frank, God can feel really distant in those times too. And and there's a purpose for that I don't fully understand. Maybe it's to um, make sure that you are staying close. But um, the I want to say one thing too about the way I painted is, and someone may be listening to this going, I'm not a painter, I'm not creative. I really didn't paint what I did, and you go find, they're all on Instagram. I didn't paint what I did to be like, oh man, this is going in a gallery. you know, um, if the whole thing ends up in a gallery one day, I would love that. But um, it was to paint without expectation, and that's really a lot of the problem we have with creativity is we're hard on ourselves. And I think it's by the age of like 10 or 11 that creativity gets pretty squashed in a lot of people, versus how imaginative kids are earlier on. But I found that by having these creative outlets for me were really helpful in processing grief and mixing those two with written form or talking, or if you need to go to counseling too. Like none of those things I think should be off the table.
I'm going to ask you this because I'm really fascinated. What was the hardest day during the year you painted 365 paintings in a row?
Um, the last one, and I kind of downplayed it in the documentary. I don't know why I did. Um, the last one was very strange because I used ashes in that painting. And so I had never touched ashes before. I'd hardly ever looked at ashes. Um, and I used ashes in that. So I had to physically handle my brother's remains. That's weird. You know, most people, I think when they pour out ashes, they're just pouring it out or something. You're not trying to intentionally, move them through your fingers. I was using that to actually paint an eye, like an abstract eye of my brother. And my wife, who's far more emotive than I am, she was sitting there filming it, and she'd film a lot of them and from like a different perspective. And I turned to her, and I was kind of like, "Am I done? What? I don't even know what's happening right now." And she just starts bawling. Then I start bawling, and I just didn't realize in some ways how much had happened over that time. Because I'd say the second hardest time was, and I look back at the paintings now and I'm like, yeah, that made sense. I really had a hard time with anger for a short period in relativity to other parts. But I had to like really learn to deal with that because it was just, I'm a scary guy when I get angry. I think like a lot of us could be. And that was also another one where I'm like, wow, okay, I'm just turning into a really bad Preston here. Um, but yeah, the end of it for sure was one of the most revelatory. The real crowning moment there, I think, was when the in the documentary when I put up the last painting, and so this 10-foot by 20-foot mosaic is sitting in my living room, and it's just, and that's kind of, we get that raw reaction in the documentary, but that's what it was. It was just like, oh my gosh, this is so big, and it happened kind of quick. A little over a year went by from starting that idea to then being able to do that, and having people around me that were supportive in that. And then there was this whole light show around it. It was very overwhelming. I think there was definitely a lot of just great spiritual stuff going on there as well. So yeah, I think those are a couple really memorable moments.
Now, what is your plan for all the paintings?
Well, I would still love to get the whole installation out there publicly. And I mean, there's in the original version of it, and I have all the paintings in boxes in my house right now. There's 4,500 backlights that actually play to music. It's such a cool experience, and you see a bit of this in the end of the documentary. Um, but just the people who would come to my house, and we would have what we just called them light shows. We'd have people come to our house, either sometimes intentionally to look at this thing, or people who are like working in my house on plumbing or something. They would stop and just stare at it, which is kind of funny. But I know the impact it can have. It's so big, and I've tried to get on the radar of like Phoenix Art Museum. I mean, I was on the news here, and the main anchor reached out to them. I almost got into, I think it's Wonder Spaces in Scottsdale. They were hesitant because it's irreplaceable artwork. So yeah, I mean, if someone's listening to this and they're like, I would like to have this in a public exhibition, let me know. It's a hard sell because it's so big, but I know it's possible. I think people need to see it in person because it would just be, I think it'd be great for them. It's something, I would like to eventually add to the documentary with a break at the end that is like X years later, and it actually captures this thing being displayed publicly. That'll happen at some point, whenever that happens. If it's 10 years later, whatever it is, I want that to be like the addendum to the documentary. So
Do you have any future projects you're working on?
It's mainly Psalm log right now. I mean, I still paint. I'll mostly paint if it's a commission, or I'll paint sometimes stuff for my church, but um and then I do like watercolor. But otherwise, Psalm log is my main thing right now. I'm just trying to stay super focused on that. And yeah, that's pretty much the deal. And then the other, kind of smaller stuff that I have in between. So
I really want to ask you this for someone that's listening. I know people that are grieving. What advice would you give someone who is grieving right now?
well, don't be shy to use creative materials. Like, go get some cheap paints. You probably go to Goodwill and find paints or something, a cheap canvas, and just paint. And I say paint versus drawing because painting has a much more like tactile feel to it. Doesn't feel as like slow. I mean, and just make a mess. Make a mess, however you're feeling. Pick colors you want, whatever, that kind of stuff. If you're like mad at God, try talking to God about whatever it is you're going through too. Express your frustrations. Like, God's waiting there for you. So I'd say it's like, don't be unafraid to, or don't be afraid to seek God in your healing, because I think He wants to be there with you. So
I love that. That is because, it gets all your emotions, your expressions, everything you're doing onto a canvas, and then you can see what comes out of it, no matter what, you're letting it out.
yeah, yeah, and I think the other thing people also need to understand too is like, again, don't keep this stuff really just bottled down inside, because that'll rear its ugly head, and you don't want that for you, the people around you. Like, find something healthy to put that into. I think creativity is a good start. Even if you think you're the dullest creative person on the face of the planet, you got it in there somewhere. Just let it out and don't, critique it along the way.
What are 3 lessons from life that have taught you through, that you've been through with faith, art, and like technology? Can you give us like 3 lessons you've learned?
Yeah. One is like, with God, all things are possible. And does that mean you're gonna like, you know, skydive without a parachute and expect to just like have a parachute end up on your back? Like, no, it's like seeking God through ambition and seeing what doors He opens, right? So I think that's number one. Like, dream big. Um, the other, I'd say, like, don't discount your ability to be creative, and I don't just mean like painting, but to approach things from a creative matter, whether it's problem solving, um, you know, that kind of thing. Like, just exercise that muscle. And then the other one I'd say is just like being community with good people, and if that's a church environment, great. But like, if you're around toxic people, that's going to bring you down. So being in community with other people that are going to build you up and build your dreams up in a way that's supportive, because I think that's really, really important there. And be clear on the dreams that you are aspiring towards too, so you're not just kind of like aimlessly, wandering in life.
Yeah, it's taking that first step towards something that you want to accomplish, actually, because for you, it was that consistency, doing it, painting every single day for 365 days. That's what
Mhm.
really matters, the consistency. Because I mean, if you stopped one of the days, the project was basically over.
Yeah, well, I mean, every time you take any kind of break, I mean, working out is a great example. When you're like, I'm going to take this week off or take a few days off, you're like, oh man, I gotta get back to working out again. So that's really, I think, yeah, key to. But I think the other thing is, it's okay. Like, don't. This is a common thing with people that have like addiction issues, right? Is like, if they relapse, they could go, well, it's all over now. Might as well just go back to being a full blown addict. Like, it's okay to restart too. Have some grace there with yourself, that like, we're not perfect. Like, if you make the decision to change, and not go back to some old way that you're running away from, or that you're ditching, and you revisit that thing in your life, It doesn't mean you're like this forever broken person again. Like, just pick it back up where you left off on. I think that's where God is so gracious in meeting us in those moments, because I think the enemy is going to tell you, "Hey, you are only as good as all your previous failures." You're like, "No, I'm not. I'm made new." Like, there's so much potential for me, and I think it. That's maybe the fourth lesson is like, don't let your past failures define you either. In so much as they limit you from being better, now and going forward.
I heard a story recently, and someone was telling me that there was a group of millionaires. They were all talking together, and they were just talking about their failures and how they made
Mm.
it. And like those are the moments that actually made anything they were going towards possible. It's the failures. It's all about the journey, not the destination, but the personal development throughout the journey.
Yeah, there's a really good book called Messy Middle that and I have a painting on the video of it on YouTube that I kind of partially named it after, but it's kind of like the beginning and end of things are usually the sort of the really sweet moments, but it's the middle where all the hard work is. So it's like that's why sometimes people get addicted to just starting projects and then they ditch it and start a new project. So but that's where you grow, is all that hard stuff, and it's not comfortable oftentimes, but man, you're right. The people who are most successful in their field, whether that's being a parent or some successful business person, they've embraced the hard parts, right? And they're growing through it in an intentional way, not just I'm going to float through this. You got to really, it takes work, you know.
What has been the biggest driving factor for success in your career?
You know, early on, it was these vows I made early in life that were kind of related to my dad and my brother, and I didn't realize that's what they were. So I was kind of like trying to achieve those, and some amount of it had to do with like money I was making, or how hard I was working, or some kind of status thing. But it really pivoted to being okay. All I can control is myself, Matthew. So if that's reality, and that is for really everyone, is you can control yourself, um I'm going to lean on God as much as possible to guide me into where all the places are that I should be going into. I'm going to take action, but if a door is really shut and I'm not getting an answer, I'm going to move to the next one versus taking a battery ram to it, because that's what I think I want. And as I look back on my life, there have been so many times where I didn't get what I wanted, and I was mad at first, but I'm so glad it didn't happen, because it probably would have been really bad for me down the line, and verifiably not good for me down the line. Um, so leaning really a lot more on who God is and guiding me is a huge game changer versus me saying, these are the plans I'm making and it's got to happen this way. That's where people, I think, develop anxiety and all sorts of angst, because you're trying to control outcomes and people and things and situations that you have no influence over. So that's given me a lot more peace in life. And, at the end of the day, I'm going to go out of this world naked the same way I came in. So I'm also just, I don't try to get too caught up on what I accumulate in this world. Um, I certainly have aspirations for my family and like things we'd like to do, but is that the end all be all? I don't think so.
I always say, like, don't let your emotions control your reality, but
Mm.
in with you put your emotions into the canvas and painting.
Mhm.
Can you unpack that for me?
Well, okay, so I want to touch on color real quick, because it's funny. I've had people look at paintings and they go, "Oh man, you must have been really angry, or you must have been really sad." I'm like, "That's what you are thinking right now, not me." Right? And again, we kind of cover this in documentary, but color is a very individualistic thing, like a perception of color, right? You may use red out of like anger. I may use red to depict some love or passion, right? So
Okay.
I remember going to Lindsay initially. I was like, hey, I want you to like psychoanalyze me through all my paintings. She's like, well, I can't really do that. That's not really how it works. It's got to be more in the moment. That's, art therapy is this kind of active, involved thing while it's going on. But I think painting allows me just to, and part of this is sure the way I think, but allows me to not be boxed in the way I think. So I'll give you an example, right? Because I've done like grief commission paintings where I'm like translating someone else's grief. The reason why abstract has worked for other people too, who may not be artistic, is if you would come to me and you're like, hey, here's a photo of my, late grandfather, and I'd like you to paint that portrait. Okay, that's one thing. It's a snapshot, a moment in time. That's very literal. Versus, hey, like this is what I've done with these grief commissions, is I learn their story. We pull out colors, we pull out keywords, we pull out symbolism, and I use those ingredients to then create the painting so that when the person sees it, and I use different techniques to help depict this, I explain their story back to them in the context of the painting. And I've had several of these people then send me a photo or a text later on being like, hey, did you see this, bird floating above the whatever in this part of the painting? I'm like, no, I didn't. Like, they're finding new meaning in the painting as it goes on. And I love that about sort of how the way abstract works. So I think that's another aspect of it that is enjoyable, and is not natural to people. Sometimes they go, abstract's kind of weird, and it's too unstructured for me. But if you really kind of sit there and ponder and think about abstract art, especially your own, I think you'll get more out of it.
I'm someone that is really big on mindset and discipline. What's a mindset you have had that's changed everything for you?
Okay, so maybe a different one than what I said earlier, because leaning on God and God's word every day, and what God is in control of, that I'm not, which is pretty much everything outside of me. And so mindset wise, I think making time for like what matters to my family, right? It's really like, yeah, things are nice, right? But what matters a lot more are the experiences. I mean, it's the whole thing where you go, hey, Matthew, what'd you get for Christmas when you were 6? You're not going to remember. If you do, I'd be impressed. But like, most people don't remember that. But you will remember like fond memories you had with your kids and that kind of stuff. So like when I think about the things, like what I'm providing to my family, is I want to provide experiences for them. So that often comes in the way of just like quality time. It could be playing games, going on hikes when we get to go on trips, those kind of things, but making those memorable moments. And then how do you do that with other people? By being really intentional in conversation, not being distracted in conversation, getting to know someone in an authentic way. Those things are, I think, important to me.
I don't ask this all the time on my podcast, but I want to ask you, what is something significant from your childhood that shaped you into who you are today?
um, I think it would just be having an older brother, younger sister. But we were about 4 and 3 years apart. So 4 years on the upper end, 3 years, and I was a middle child. So,
Same here.
yeah, okay. So we're the most stable ones, I think. But
Balance.
But yeah, I mean, it's funny. I have 3 kids now, and they're all close in age, and it's like a tornado half the time. But it's impossible to discount the I think magnitude of that. And I think when my brother passed, you don't realize, and even though like I wasn't like we were close, but not. There's a lot of oil and water with us, and so I couldn't be actively involved in his life every day and not vice versa, because we would have probably just killed each other. But you don't realize how big of a piece someone is of you until they're gone. And siblings are a really unique relationship in the sense that you grow up with this other person or people, and they are forming you, and there's like pieces of you that you share. And I think it's why you can go see a sibling and just have this weird connection with them. And you may otherwise go, God, I really can't stand him, but there's still this connection there because you shared the same parents, different upbringing, because every kid's different, and parents, usually parent different kids differently. But having the siblings that I did shape me in one way or another. And so, yeah, that's really, you can't really separate yourself from that. It just makes us who we are in many ways, at least for some period.
No, 100%. And me, I have two brothers myself, and we're always butting heads sometimes. Sometimes it's those two against me, or sometimes it's like me and someone else against someone else. It's always something. And one time I told my brother, and I go, I really wouldn't be friends with you, if you weren't my brother.
Oh yeah.
I was mad at that time, but we're all better today. So, but you know what I mean.
Oh yeah.
I want to dive into, like, as the show is called like Every Day is Friday, and Friday has a special energy, whether it's like freedom, excitement, or just feeling of accomplishment after a long week. I want to hear from you. What does Every Day is Friday mean to you?
Oh man, I think it's like do something you enjoy, or find meaning and purpose in what you are doing. Um, I think it could also kind of mean that like point to rest. Part of the thing about Friday is like getting to rest. So you don't have to wait for that one day, 1 or 2 days on the weekend to rest. Like what do you do to rest in the days as well, at night, whenever it is. But I think rest is important, and we can't discount the nature of that. And I don't mean like there are different connotations of rest, but on the really kind of spiritual one, it's like getting concerted time with God where you're not distracted by the world. But also it's okay to do nothing. I struggle with that, and I've gotten better at it, but man, I it's times where you just sit down and we are doing all sorts of things, especially as entrepreneurs or business owners, executives, moms, dads, whatever. If you're really just running around all the time, find a time to do nothing to restore yourself, because that eventually you don't want to go on burnout either. So just be really cognizant of where you're at, like mentally, I think.
That is such a good point. And find time for yourself at the end of the day, because you got to know thyself.
Yeah.
This is your chance to leave the listeners with something powerful. Is there anything else you want to share?
Um, Man, if you don't know Jesus, get to know him. I think that's really important. I mean, I've said of course a lot. I mean, if you're listening by this point, there's been so many kind of nuggets I've dropped about creativity and in my own journey, and of course Psalm log. And I think if you don't consider yourself an introspective person, that's okay, but it's really good to really question why you are the way you are. um and be okay with establishing a baseline and figuring out who you want to be, and working towards that. So Psalm log could be helpful in that for sure. But yeah, I mean, I've said so much along the way. I'm maybe out of wisdom for the day.
It's always good to go download the app in the description down below and start journaling. And all your information will be in the description down below. But I want to know where the people can follow and support your work.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, LinkedIn's where I'm most active. If you want to watch The Art of Grieving, you can just you go Google the art of grieving, and there's a whole featured card for it. Go find it on Amazon Prime, YouTube, video on demand, Tubi, Plex, Apple TV, that kind of stuff. If you want to go to a library and rent it, you probably can at your local library on DVD. Psalm log you can start for free, so you can do. I think you get up to free journals, and then you can start a free trial as well after that, to get the fuller experience. But yeah, I mean, it's super easy to go in there and get started. I encourage you to do one, see if it scratches any itch at all. But yeah, and then Instagram, I'm there too. So most active on LinkedIn.
No, I really appreciate you being here and sharing your stories and experiences. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Matthew. It's been great to be on Every Day is Friday.
Yeah, and if you're listening out there, if you enjoyed this, make sure you follow, share, and keep that Every Day is Friday mindset going. Stay inspired and make every day feel like Friday. Till next time, everybody. Peace.